And that's the end of the slide. Where's that button to stop sharing? Look at that.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian, for that update. That's
Well,
really a good lot.
any questions on it? You know, I still got a couple more minutes before we got to take that first commercial break. So, come on, sister, tell me a little bit more about what's going on in your life. I mean, everything going okay? How can I, Project DieHard, help you in your mission? You're doing so much for.
You asking me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know what? I think what we're doing for the people, and I am so glad that we are so committed to our mission. And you know, this is not an easy mission. It takes 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I know the same for you is this is nonprofit, doing something nonprofit. You're just disposed all the time to talk to people, to listen to people, to see what you can do to help. You get some volunteers at random. People just come to you. They want to ask questions. They want to donate something. It is still up to the person to really see how you can, get that coordinated. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I know that this is something that you've committed yourself with friends to do, and it's not an easy commitment. But like we know that this is a project that is spirit led. When something is spirit led, honestly, God takes control. We just follow God's, and that's what I'm doing in mine. The only thing I can ask right now is that we pray for other. That's that I can share. Let's just keep praying for one another.
You are on our prayer list. Okay, you are on our prayer list.
Yeah.
And remember, that's the first thing we ask for too: prayer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time. Yeah, time to do that first paying the bill thing. Emily, are you ready to take us out? Here we go.
We at Project DieHard are grateful for the awesome people at CFI Equipment located in Calvert City, Kentucky. They help mission with equipment to do the big work on our facilities. To see their inventory and find a great deal, visit cfiequipmentinc.com. That's cfiequipmentinc.com. They are currently helping us to put a tractor on forward operating base rush. So stop by and meet these amazing people. Help them who help us bring hope to veterans. We at Project are blessed to be working with the Veterans Ranch, bringing free equine therapy services to our facilities for our veterans and their families. No one organization can do it all. It takes teamwork to make the dream work. Visit theveteransranch.org. That's theveteransranch.org for more information. By supporting the one, you support both. Donate today. We at Project DieHard are grateful for the support of No Quarters 1776. Are you looking for the perfect swag? Well, the right place. This veteran-owned company supplies our mission with its products. So by supporting them, you support the mission and a veteran-owned company. Visit noquarter1776.com today. That is noquarter1776.com and use code PDH22 to help us both bring hope to veterans.
All right, well, I guess it's time for me to bow out because I gotta make a couple phone calls. But we have Cynthia Adams coming up. I had a chance to meet her earlier today, and I gotta say, I am impressed. This is a great woman, an author. Hey, wow, just know that we are going to get a copy of her latest book. So, as you know, we're trying to build a library. But with that, I'm going to bring her on, and I'm going to bow out while you ladies talk about the mission and each other. All right, here we are. Cynthia.
Hi there, Brian.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Hello, sister. How are you?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to let you two talk.
All
I
right.
got to do some stuff,
I
but
think
hang
we'll be
out
fine.
because I'm going to try to make it back for that question and answer.
All right.
So remember, people, put your questions in the comments. We will see them. And if I pick yours to answer, I'll be glad to. We'll talk at you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, I'm
Yeah.
so impressed by your work, sister. I had no idea. It's really commendable and heartwarming to hear what you're doing, and very vital.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And it's great to have you this evening, guys. So please feel free to share with our audience who you are,
All right.
what you did, and what you're still doing right now, and actually how you're connected to Project DieHard.
Well, I think the reason I'm on this program is that my most recent book is about World War II, and it is a mostly true story which occurred in my mother-in-law's family, my husband's side of the family, and 6 young people who were growing up in Slovenia at the time World War II broke out. Each went in different directions, but had extremely difficult situations, of course, because they were living in a war-torn part of Europe, which most of Europe was during war. And one of my mother-in-law's brothers was a prisoner of war in a Nazi concentration camp for 4 years. And about him, I tell quite a few stories, and it made a huge impact on me about his life and the other ordeals of his siblings. So I very interested. My dad was a veteran. My uncle was, my husband. I mean, I'm very interested in serving veterans anyway, but this book just made it more immediate, more poignant. Before this, I was a professor and wrote, things like textbooks. But when I retired, it was time to get into a more creative mode and see what my head wanted to talk about.
Wow, that's really great. Thanks for coming and for sharing. Wow. So, what do you find most touching when you were writing that book?
Well, may I plug it? It's called The Red
yeah, please.
Oops, I never know which side to do. The Red Toque.
Okay, Red Toque.
Or Toque. It can be pronounced either way. Just that the love the family had and the closeness they had, and they lived in a very agrarian society where they farmed and ate what they farmed, or they traded with neighbors. They didn't have any interest at all in being drawn in by Hitler, by Austria, Germany, those countries into the war. And then how they went different directions, how they lost each other in a way. Some of them ended up in different countries after the war. Some of them had horrible things happen. And, just the sacrifice that they made fighting their war. They weren't Americans, but they were on the same side, even though part of the time Yugoslavia was tied up by Hitler and appeared not to be helpful to the Allies. It wasn't helping Hitler either. And it was a very difficult situation for those farmers who were not really motivated to be warriors, but were forced into it. Yeah. You know, many people want peace and would be peaceful if only they were left alone. It happens in every country, doesn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
it does, and it's so sad. You know, it is so sad that some people who didn't want to be drawn to stuff, one way or the other, you find yourself in it. You don't really know what to do once you find yourself in the middle of the whole show. And one thing about war that actually bothers me a lot is it really destabilizes the family. You know, individuals to start with. Then you have family destabilized. Then you have the society, and then the community falls apart. And you find people who have lived together in their neighbors, not all of a sudden enemies.
Yes.
And you know, through war, people separate ways, and sometimes they might reconnect, but it's really hard. You know, because of suffering, experience, and that people tend to get separated, and that is really not good. Then you have to start dealing with not only the war, but then the separation that you have, you know, from your family, and then it takes a while to really get through it, you know, and some people never see their family together anymore.
Well, that's right.
You know, it's so traumatic, it's so painful. And I know that a lot of our veterans have traumatic experiences. And
terrible.
I know some lost family members that they cannot reconnect, and it becomes a problem. And that's what causes some of this tragedy we see today of people committing suicide, because they feel, coming with that whole trauma, they feel they don't fit in the society anymore, or society does not understand them. And they can't even connect to the family they knew prior to going to, you know, war. So then people get frustrated, and what else do you expect them to do? And that's so sad. But I'm so glad that Brian is actually offering, through this nonprofit, offering hope and calling on all of us to kind of see how we can rally around and volunteer energy, just be perfect in any way possible, to make sure that we give it to thank them for what they have done, for all the sacrifices they made, and to let them know that, yes, you still belong. You know, we still care about you. We want to know your story. We need you to share at your comfort level. And that really brings that, close that gap in a way, and help them to understand that, yes, even though that we've lost others, but there are people who are still attaching value to who we are and the sacrifices we've made.
Well, I think everything you've said is spot on. I know quite a few veterans because my classmates were called into the Vietnam War, and I'm back in that era. And whenever I say something about veterans on social media or anywhere, they're so grateful for the support. It means a lot, even though I always think, well, of course they know we're grateful. We're their friends. We have a good relationship, but you hear it, and no one ever knows how much. Many folks, leave the war with the PTSD, with the other kinds of problems related to the trauma they've seen, and they deserve and get attention, but they may not get enough. That's why we have to keep publicizing suicide prevention, reach out, we're here, call someone, because suicide is so permanent. As a psychologist, I always used to say, no matter how bad you feel today, you have a chance to feel better tomorrow. but not if you do something like suicide, if you do something that's going to totally erase the hope of your family, your friends, and just causes injury for everyone else too.
Right.
Because you're not worthless, you're very important to them, and it's you show up and they'll be there for you. So, everything you're saying is so important. You can't say it enough. You can't have enough programs that support veterans. I go to several coffee hours with the veterans in our community, and I know that they're just always glad to see somebody who's there as a friend, and we'll talk to them about the war and have a donut. Not that I can eat donuts, but but there's ways of appealing to the veterans all over the place that are nearby or far away, and that's an important mission.
Right.
I know my father was always the proudest of his Army years in World War II, and the rest of his life he felt when I was in the Army, and it never failed to get somebody to pay attention. That was good.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, I'm glad that there are people like you who are still, active, remembering our veterans, finding ways or curating ways to make that connection with them. It isn't really easy, but we have to all find ways to do that. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I went to this guy was supposed to, I think he was sitting at the pew, but at the edge. And come time for communion, unfortunately, he needed to stand up for other people to pass. And I noticed, of course, that he had his walker, and it was, for me, it was practically impossible for him to get up and then move. So what I did then, I motioned for other people, let's just walk around, go to the other people. So he said to me, oh, thank you so much. Once upon a time, I wanted to really do everything, but since after he started with, I'm a veteran. I'm like, wow, thank you so much for all you did. Then he started sharing his story with me, that one time that he was able to do that. But right now, this is where he is. And I'm like, you know what? We still value you. We still love, and we really appreciate the gift you are to us, and to your family and to the whole society. So, that may not be a huge thing to him, but I can bet he recognizes that someone else appreciates. And so,
I'm sure your words were like honey on his
right.
that they're probably so appreciated. And here he was struggling, and then you recognized it and let him tell his story. That was really important. I don't know if he knew who you were then, but I'm sure he does now. That's lovely. That's lovely.
Right. So yeah, that's all what I feel. It was should really try to do. We don't have to really do a whole lot if you feel you cannot. Something like if you recognize a veteran, just even that gesture, let them know that you recognize them, appreciate them in any way possible. If you can buy a cup of coffee, that's wonderful. If you can sit for a minute or two to have a conversation with them, just do that. Because I believe every little thing we do to acknowledge somebody sends them that love message.
And I was going to say, you don't know which day it is really most needed, because you could think that somebody is doing fine, and you'll find out later that the fact that you smiled and said something to them that day changed a plan they had that was not going to be good. Really got through to them. So at every point, those contacts are so special and so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm glad we're sharing this. And like you said, we can't speak enough, of supporting our veterans. And I know there are a whole lot of organizations, nonprofit and government organizations trying to provide support. But guess what? There's always a need. There's always a need. So let us not just take that for granted. Just know that wherever we find our veterans, they have a need that they might not verbalize to us until one gets connected, establish that relationship. And then you see people opening up to even share, share what they've been carrying all along. And that really helps if they can find time to share quality time with us and with other people who are really interested in listening to their story. Only allowing somebody to really share their stories enough. You don't really have to say anything or do anything, but that time you're spending listening means a whole lot to people. Yeah.
Just showing up can,
yes,
so
exactly.
you show up and then they count on you and things happen.
Mm-hmm.
You find out who's inside there. I know the first time I went to speak to the veterans about this book, I was amazed that there were actually some World War II veterans in the room. Mm-hmm. And those folks were older than my dad would have been, and really still there and still happy to talk about the war because somebody was interested in their war. Mm-hmm. And, they said, you wrote about being in a in a POW camp. Well, we could tell you some more stories. And I said, tell me, you never know.
Right.
I could improve on everything.
Right.
But I wanted to hear what they had done and experience. It was very special to me. I guess it was like seeing my father again,
yes.
to be around them. It was very nice. Yeah.
And I'm sure wherever your father is will really be smiling, and saying, yes, I got a daughter who is sharing, not only appreciating his own services, but the services of other veterans, all over the United States. And that's really awesome.
I know that would be important.
Right.
Certainly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I was going to say what happened with our family in Slovenia was that they were all on the side of the Allies, so they had to go to different countries in order not to be swept up by the Nazis. But they were all very, very good Catholics. The Catholic Church in Slovenia is very important, and they were raised in parochial schools, and they had, been good Catholic kids. I'm not saying Catholicism is the answer. I'm just saying it was their way. And when Tito came in to Slovenia at the end of the war, because the communists had been on the side of the Allies towards the end, and they were being rewarded by being given this country, by being given the 3 countries or 4 countries that were Yugoslavia. Tito then took over with a very communistic bent. And what he did at the end of the war is a big part of it, because he committed horrible atrocities to anyone who hadn't been with the communists during the fighting. He assumed that they were bad guys, and he had permission from the Communist Party to get rid of them. And about 125,000 people in a small country were slaughtered and buried and hidden away at the end of that war in Slovenia. Just like we see in the Ukraine, when you go back in and the communists have been there, they have buried people in ditches and in buildings. I mean, I don't mean to upset anyone. This is supposed to be an uplifting show, but that happened there. And part of why I like this story out is that it's not, quote unquote, just a World War II book about a very special country through some extreme times with the communists at the end of the war, when everyone should have been rejoicing.
Right.
everyone was displaced, and
Mhm.
if they were Catholic, they weren't appreciated by communists, and religion wasn't. So that was
Yeah, I mean, you're sharing what happened. And to be honest, that's who really understand the devastation that war brings. Try their best to stop it.
that's right.
Stop it, prevent it. Whatever you can do, please stop it. Because we all know, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, there are all kinds of havoc. It is havoc in people's lives, families, and the whole nation. So it's not something that anybody would dream of. Even for your enemy, you don't want that to happen, because then, as
Right.
your enemy is dying, you're not left out.
Only some other way, because I know people have their differences, but why do they have to?
Exactly.
And maybe women would be just as bad if we were in charge of the world. But I know mothers and women in general are usually very much soft issue of war than most of the gentlemen are. And women fight. I know that. I'm not trying to be sexist here, just expressing a perspective that
Right.
you and I might have that maybe some others don't have.
Mhm.
But if there only was a way to prevent these things or end them more quickly. And what happened with Slovenia was they almost created a country of PTSD in a sense, because those who witnessed the murders after the people had come home from the war, they watched the communists who now had control of their country commit these crimes, and they did not dare to speak. In fact, some of them left the country just because of what they'd seen. They thought for sure someone would be after them.
Mhm.
So the impact, as you're saying, the displacement, the families being torn apart, the people were hiding. They didn't even want to say they were Slovenian where they lived because to them for what they had seen. So, the ripples after a war,
Mhm.
even if it's while between wars, there were ongoing ripples
Right.
that just can drown anyone they strike, really.
And the truth of it, and I think some of the veterans will also agree with, is that even with war, we don't really come to the solution. Even with that whole war, all we end up doing is to re-traumatize more people, end the life of more people,
Yeah.
and still, not really come out make peace with the whole thing. I have read, I'm sure you have also read a whole lot of books that talked about wars and this and that. It still did not solve it. Some years down the road, the whole thing starts all over again. And you're like, oh, so after all this war and killings and all that, you people still did not come to, an agreement. So, and dialogue, I always believed in dialogue. I just believe that if we spend time talking to each other, speak more, talk more, than really use that machine gun of your mouth. Talk about it more than being physical. I think it is better, and I think women do that better than trying to be physical. That doesn't really solve problems. At least that's my own opinion.
Well, I think there's not much gain by
Mhm.
bloody warfare if you
Right.
really could measure. And if you do believe in peace and you do believe in harmony,
Mhm.
and if we all had a little humility, sometimes I think the ego causes more trouble than it's worth. And people can't be the one to say uncle or the one to lose or the one to step back for fear they'll be seen as weak. But,
Mhm.
really, what are you gaining?
I know.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So thank you for sharing. I also have a question for you. Did you? I know you've written other books before this one.
Yes.
So can you take us back to some of the books you've written, and is that possible to share?
Sure, I can talk a little bit. Well, the first one I wrote was called Italian Spices, memoir. And it so happens that my father-in-law, who was a GI, met my mother-in-law in England, where she had fled to during the war involving Slovenia. My dad, while he was a GI, met my in Rome, Italy during the war. So I ended up as half Englishish and half Italian. And the Italian side of my family was very spicy and fun.
Yeah.
And great food, great
Right.
family things. We would visit them, they would come here. I had 9 first cousins in Italy and a bunch of aunties. And I wanted to write about it because I thought it was a bit unusual for a New England girl to have an Italian mother. And so I wrote about it and included some of her recipes. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, the book is sold out because I only had a small publisher who did a couple of runs of the book. And once they had sold, I didn't republish it myself. But I enjoy having it and to give to my children and grandchildren to pass on. The other 3 books, you might not want to hear too much about, Sister. They're horror novels. They're about spooky things. They are New England horror, I call them. They take place in old New England, in old houses, in spooky cellars, and attics, and creepy, crawly graveyards. And they're based on my weird imagination. The fact that I always loved Edgar Allan Poe as a kid, and then I've read a lot of Stephen King. And we, my husband and I, rehabbed several older homes. And so I would see spooky things within those homes while we were cleaning them up. And I put them all together and wrote the first book, which is called The Farmhouse on Cemetery Hill Road. And I think that's here. And then, did I say something wrong?
No, sorry.
You had to leave me.
Sorry.
The Farmhouse on Cemetery Hill Road. These are all on Amazon, my books, except for the first one, The Red Toque and The Farmhouse on Cemetery Hill Road was my first horror novel. And my friends loved it. And a few people corresponded with me and said, well, there's still a little bit more you could have said. Will there be a sequel? And I thought, well, gee, maybe not. But then the book was there. And what are you going to do to stay busy at home? So I wrote The Portal. And The Portal is the sequel, the first sequel, Farmhouse on Cemetery Hill Road. And after The Portal, I had one more horror novel in me, so I concluded the series. So it's a trilogy, and that last one is called Grace. And it's Grace. It's a girl's name in the story, but it is a very good book for women to read. I think there's a sense of empowerment for women when they read this book. It doesn't. It ends on a much better note than you could imagine a horror book,
Right.
doing. So,
wow.
So those are the 5 books I've written for fun. I've written a textbook that is, to help future health professionals know how to deal with the emotional side of the patient, because most of my students were physical therapists, dietitians, science, anyone who had to interact, nurses, pharmacists, who had to work with patients, needed to know they might be going through. And that made a nice leap into understanding PTSD when I was out in the field for a while. That by teaching it, and I could really learn to practice what I taught. Fortunately, it worked okay. It's been interesting.
Wow, I know you've really written books and literally different,
A different genre every time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's interesting. And you have your information. Is it possible to put your information on the chart?
How do I do that here? Do I put it in the chat?
Yeah. So
what I'll do there is put my website. How would that?
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Put the website so people can find you, because this is interesting. Yeah.
It's Cindy.com.
Okay. Okay, good.
It's simple, and if you remember one of my first names, I use several names when I'm writing, but you can find it all under Cynthia Adams on Amazon. But get books by Cindy.com. We'll review what's in the books, and there's also a button there that it says buy now or buy this book, and if you touch it, you go right to Amazon and you buy it. It's the same price.
Okay.
I am putting some money into Wounded Warriors, which I know may be a little, some people have different charities to help veterans. That only one I knew much about at the time. I was announcing a charity, but this portion of the proceeds from the sale of the Red Tube do go to help Wounded Warriors. And
good. That's great. That's great.
I'm hoping to do the right thing.
I know.
and learn as I go. Learn as I go.
That's for all of us. We'll learn as we go. Nobody knows it all. Even with this project, that Project DieHard, that Brian has embarked on, it's all learning. We are learning to navigate, how to navigate the whole system, how to even reach out to people. Because right now there are a whole lot of organizations all over the place wanting and intending to do the same thing or similar things. But the thing is, we still have to learn how to collaborate, to even engage one another, so we know what we're doing and where we want to go. So
that's right. I mean, I think instead of competing for the same dollars, you can work together or find those that you trust enough that they're really, their mission is the same as your mission or just about the same. Somebody's ego may have shifted a little, but you can do probably better with a little hard work to coordinate. Yeah.
Right.
It's hard work.
Yeah. It also gives the people, the consumers, so to speak, an idea that, okay, these people are here for the same purpose, not trying to, maybe lord over us. They're just trying to see how they can support us. And it makes it easier, really, rather than, dealing with one person today, now another organization pops out here and all that. I keep saying that to even my clients, to let them know that, we're here to support you guys, men, women, and children, and actually families. So any opportunity we get in really collaborating with other organizations, that will really be helpful, because then collectively you and know what we're doing, instead of, this person is doing this leg here and the other person is doing a little bit there. And in the end, it's like we're not catching it, But
as long as you know that other organization is as honest as you are, and you're in close to 100%, if not 100%, somehow can go towards the good of the people you're wanting to help, then you can collaborate. It's when somebody seems to want a little too much, a little too big a piece, then it makes it more difficult. Yeah.
True, and we're dealing with human beings. We all know what that means. So
You got to be careful. Keep your eyes open, sister.
I know, right?
Right.
No, I get what you're saying, and I have really fallen a victim in a few occasions. So right now, I'm being more careful, honestly, to know what I'm doing and who I'm working with.
Well,
Yeah.
I see you as a very nice person, and I think somebody could take advantage of that if you hadn't already caught on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good. That's wonderful.
So thank you so much for coming. Look, Ryan said he is, I think he got busy with other stuff. He is not coming back, although we have
Okay.
about 8 minutes. So
Yeah.
is there any other thing you would like to talk to us about in general, knowing that you have all these experiences, especially as a writer?
Well, I did get a question through the Authors Guild, to which I belong as a member. Some high school child kid, young man, I guess, I should say, to me said, how do you get into historical fiction? I want to know about history. And I said, the most important thing is that you read about history. You've got to read and read and read, and even where things are on that spectrum of history. So when I wanted to write about World War II, I didn't think just because my dad had been in that war that I knew anything much about it. And so I read, in fact, I'm probably one of the few novelists who puts the bibliography on her website, but I did. I thought the books I read were so helpful that I posted them on my website. So anyone who is interested in that that area, that part of Eastern Europe, could learn more. But I told him to read a lot of history, and then once he thought he knew the part of history he wanted to write about, he could focus on that, because it's a lot more detailed. He could possibly to visit that country and to any people who might be living from that era, because finding somebody who experienced it or whose big sister experienced it that will really know what you're talking about is a very important factor in producing something that's accurate and feeling. You almost have to capture that feeling, from other people. You can't just get it from reading. So that was my advice to him, and I thought that it was a good question from him. How do you get into it? Right. But I know a lot of young people who want to be writers who don't want to read.
Yeah.
And that's tough. I did just put the Farmhouse on Cemetery Hill Road has just come out as an Audible book. So it's on audio. Every place that sells audio sells it now. It's just come out.
That's great.
Also, you can get it through Amazon, but you can get it through Barnes and Nobles and Nook book. It's just there if you request it. And you fear, though, that driving is scary enough, and now people will be listening to a horror book while they're driving. I hope they hang on.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think they have that. They may have to have the caution placed on it. So you don't have somebody suing you.
No, I don't think so. But anybody who listens to the books has to consider what they're doing at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And on another I think it's an interesting note. If anyone in your audience happens to be Slovenian, it's an interesting note, because the Red Tube is now being translated into Slovenian.
Oh.
So it's about that country. They have a unique language, and we expired.
You did?
Well, it went away. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh my God. gosh, what happened?
I don't know. It's about 8:30. Do you suppose we ran out of time?
No, not I know of. Emily, are you there?
Yeah, we can see you, Cynthia.
You can?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we can see you and hear you too. So.
I can hear you, but I just see a blank page. I'll just
We hear you. That's yeah, I see you too. So
well, this is working at your end. Must be at
Yes.
my end.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there's a storm right now. We're having terrible snow.
Oh,
And-
you're having snow. We're having terrible rain.
So
we're coming through.
yeah, it may be the atmosphere is interfering, or the
It's possible.
trees, lean on the wires during some of these storms. We haven't had many this winter, so they haven't been broken down very much. So, anyway. Let me just thank you. Well, I have another minute.
Yeah, true.
Thank you, and thank Project DieHard for having me as a guest and allowing me to talk about my books, and especially The Red Toque, which is about World War II, and might mean a lot to the veterans watching or those who've served. And I hope it's a tribute to them and to all of our fathers and uncles as well. And I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate it. And I loved meeting you, sister.
Well, thank you so much.
You're such a great lady.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming too. Yeah, and sharing with us. That will really help us and help our veterans to know that, there's that kind of resource out there that they can check out. Because every bit of thing counts, and providing
I
that
hope
to
so.
them hope. Yeah.
And I hope that Brian or one of you will send me your mail address, because I promised him a copy of a book for your library. And I will send them as soon as I get the proper address.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I know Emily will do that. Emily will send you that information.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for all your help.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Thank you so much for coming. And
Okay.
hopefully we'll have you sometime in the future to join us and, share with us one more time what is going on, the updates and stuff.
All right. I'd be delighted to. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a blessed night.
Thank you, sister. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Ah.
All right. So thank you all for staying with us and listening to Adams talk to us, sharing all the information, especially in her books. And the one she wrote about the World War II is very informative. So please reach out in any way possible to get a copy for yourself. And right now we are at 8:30 and we are wrapping up. And we're glad for the time we've spent here this evening. And we really encourage everyone to please reach out to Brian, Emily, or myself if you have something to share with us, with any questions or even support. Let us know how we can help or collectively give hope and support to our veterans. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Until we see you next Monday. Bye.